Jung once said, "No one achieves a clear conscience without confronting their shadow." That shadow isn't just the hidden parts of yourself, it's also the strength you refuse to acknowledge. You didn't land here by accident. Something deep inside you, an unshakable urge, pushed you to search for answers, to make sense of what you've experienced. And by the end of this video, everything will become crystal clear. You're a kind, generous person, always there for others, always willing to help. But if kindness is supposed to bring connection, respect, and appreciation, why does it often feel like it does the opposite? Why do some people look down on you? Why does the respect you give not always return to you? You've tried to do the right thing, to be good, to be understanding. Yet time and time again, you find yourself ignored, taken for granted, or even exploited. This isn't bad luck. It's a pattern, a precise psychological dynamic that plays out over and over again. Carl Jung spoke of the shadow, the hidden part of the mind that reveals itself in ways we least expect. One of those ways? Contempt. Contempt for those who don't set clear boundaries. And today, you're going to discover the 5 reasons why your kindness may be costing you respect, and more importantly, how to protect yourself without sacrificing who you are. Before we begin, make sure you subscribe to Carl Jung Philosophy channel so you don't miss out on life-changing insights into personal and spiritual growth. Now, let's begin. The paradox of kindness. The kinder you are, the less people seem to take you seriously. You're respectful, understanding, and generous. Yet there's always someone who treats you as an afterthought. They ignore you, exploit you, act as if your presence is an obligation rather than a choice. You were taught that kindness is supposed to invite respect. So why does it so often lead to being undervalued? Because kindness isn't always seen as equality. More often, it's seen as an opportunity. Here are the 5 reasons why being too kind can lead others to underestimate you, and how to shift the dynamic without losing your essence. The first reason. Boundless kindness is perceived as weakness. Human nature is wired to test boundaries, and if you don't set any, people will push to see how far they can go. If you're always available, if you never say no, if you consistently put others ahead of yourself without hesitation, some will see you as manipulable. Psychologists call this the benevolence exploitation effect, when kindness without limits invites people to take, without ever feeling the need to give. It's not always malice, it's just how the mind works. In both social and professional settings, those who establish clear boundaries naturally command more respect. But those who are endlessly accommodating, they become the ones people assume will always be there, the ones they turn to only when needed without a second thought. And the result? Your kindness gets used, not because people are inherently cruel, but because scarcity creates value and constant availability lowers it. But here's the key. The answer is not to stop being kind. It's to redefine kindness with strength. The ability to say no, to hold your ground, to protect your space. If you don't embrace that side of yourself, you'll never balance your generosity with self-respect, and without that balance, others won't see you as a person with an inner force. They'll see someone they can use at will. But that changes today, because once you understand the psychology behind why people take, you'll finally learn how to command respect without losing your kindness. The second reason. Your kindness exposes their deepest insecurities. Not everyone can accept kindness for what it is. For some, your generosity isn't a gift, it's a threat. Why? Because your kindness acts like a mirror. It forces them to confront something they don't want to see, their own inability to give without expecting something in return. There are people who have spent years, maybe even their entire lives, wrapped in armor made of cynicism and mistrust. They believe everything has a price, that every gesture comes with an agenda, that kindness is nothing but a cleverly disguised transaction. And then you show up. You give without conditions. You offer without expecting. You exist outside their cynical worldview, and that terrifies them. Because if you can be kind without ulterior motives, then maybe they've been wrong all along. But instead of embracing that uncomfortable truth, they do the only thing they know, reject it. Some will dismiss your kindness as naive, some will see it as weakness, others will twist it into something sinister, assuming you must have a hidden motive. Because in their world, selflessness doesn't exist. It's just manipulation in disguise. But here's the truth. Their reaction has nothing to do with you. It's a reflection of their own wounds. People who have been betrayed, used, or abandoned often build a fortress around themselves, one made of distrust and cold calculation. To survive, they convince themselves that no one gives freely, that everyone takes, that vulnerability is a risk they cannot afford. So when they meet someone like you, someone who defies that logic, their instincts kick in. They reject you to protect themselves. Carl Jung spoke of the shadow, the part of the mind where we bury everything we refuse to acknowledge about ourselves. When your kindness meets someone who has repressed their ability to trust, it triggers an unconscious defense. Their mind refuses to accept that generosity can be genuine. Instead of seeing your altruism for what it is, they project their fears onto you: distrust, hostility, contempt. It's not you they're rejecting. It's the part of themselves they refuse to face. But here's the danger. When someone builds their life around mistrust, they don't just protect themselves from pain, they also cut themselves off from connection. They become prisoners of their own fear, trapped in a world where kindness is always suspicious and love always has conditions. And the saddest part, they may never escape it. The third reason, defying social norms, invites resistance. We live in a world that worships dominance, a world where toughness is glorified, where success is defined by competition, and where power is the only currency that seems to matter. In this landscape, kindness isn't just rare, it's disruptive. Because choosing to be kind means rejecting the unspoken rules of the game. It means stepping outside the toxic cycle of ego, status, and self-interest. And that makes people uncomfortable. Society conditions us to think in terms of transactions, quid pro quo, favors in exchange for favors. Everything must come with a price. Everyone must have an agenda. So when someone like you shows up, someone who gives without expecting, who helps without calculating the return, it shakes their entire belief system. Some will see you as naive, others will see you as a threat, because your existence alone proves that the world doesn't have to be the way they've always believed. And instead of welcoming that truth, they fight it. They reject you, mock you, exclude you. Not because there's something wrong with you, but because your kindness forces them to question themselves. To accept your way of being, they'd have to face an uncomfortable truth, that their obsession with power, control, and status might not be as necessary as they thought. And most people? They'd rather tear down the mirror than look into it. Carl Jung once said, "What you resist persists." And in social dynamics, this truth is inescapable. When you refuse to wear the mask of the ego, when you choose authenticity over power plays, you become a disturbance, a crack in the illusion that so many have spent their entire lives reinforcing. And some will hate you for that, not because you've done anything wrong, but because your kindness exposes what they've buried, the part of themselves they've suppressed under layers of ambition, competition, and fear. Before we continue, if this message is resonating with you, if you see these patterns in your own life, take a moment to share this video with someone who needs to hear it. And if you want to support this channel and help us continue creating content like this, you can click the thank you button below to make a donation. Your support means the world to us. Now, let's keep going. The fourth reason, generosity can become an unwritten contract of sacrifice. There's a hidden cost to being the one who always gives. At first, your generosity feels like a gift. You offer your time, your energy, your attention, without hesitation, without expecting anything in return. But over time, something shifts. You don't just give anymore. You become the giver, the one who's always there, the one who listens, the one who helps, no matter what. And when you fill that role long enough, people stop asking if you need anything. They assume you don't. Your presence becomes expected, your kindness, routine, your support, an unspoken obligation, not because people are cruel, not because they don't care, but because you've taught them that you'll always be there, no matter what. And in that moment, a dangerous cycle begins. The more you give, the less they see your needs. The less they see your needs, the more they take for granted that you have none. You are no longer a person with limits, with emotions, with struggles of your own. You are simply the one who gives. But here's the truth. Respect isn't earned through endless generosity. It's earned through balance. Saying no doesn't make you selfish. It makes you human. You cannot be someone's pillar of strength if you are crumbling inside. You cannot support others if you are running on empty. Jung once said, "If a person wants to see the good in you, they will. If they want to see the bad, they will. And that has more to do with them than with you." But if you never express your needs, if you never set limits, people will stop believing you even have them. Because generosity, unchecked, carries a dangerous shadow, the risk of becoming invisible, of existing only in relation to what you can give. But true generosity isn't about losing yourself. It's about knowing when to give, without disappearing in the process. The fifth reason, unlimited availability, diminishes the value of your kindness. The more accessible something is, the less it is valued. This isn't just true for material things, it applies to people as well. If others know that no matter what, you will always be there, ready to help, ready to listen, asking for nothing in return, something dangerous happens. Your presence stops being appreciated and starts being expected. Not out of malice, not because people don't care, but because the mind is wired to take for granted what is always there. And the cost? Your kindness, once a gift, becomes a background noise. It no longer feels special. It no longer holds weight. It is simply assumed. And the irony? The very people you support the most may be the first to overlook you. The hidden cost of unchecked generosity. Carl Jung believed that balance is everything, that light without shadow cannot exist. And kindness, when given without limits, carries its own shadow. Exhaustion, frustration, resentment. You begin to wonder, do they even see what I do for them? Do they appreciate it? Or am I just expected to be there? The harsh truth? People value what is scarce. When your kindness is given without discretion, without boundaries, it loses its impact. What was once seen as generosity becomes routine. What was once admired becomes assumed. And in time you find yourself drained, tired of giving, tired of feeling invisible, tired of feeling like your kindness is a burden instead of a choice. But here's the good news. You are in control of this dynamic. Kindness should be a choice, not an obligation. The solution is not to stop being kind. It is to be intentional about where you invest your energy, to choose when and to whom you give, to recognize that generosity carries weight and that weight should not rest solely on your shoulders, because true kindness isn't about giving everything until there's nothing left of you. It's about knowing when to give, how to give, and when to step back without guilt. Your turn. Has this happened to you? Have you ever felt taken for granted because of your kindness? Have you found a way to enforce boundaries without losing yourself in the process? Share your experience in the comments. We'd love to hear your thoughts. And as always, thank you for being here. See you in the next video.